2 more minutes, then we'll get started. Like I said, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We've got a little chat icebreaker for anyone. Whatever you're most excited about for this herring count season, even if it's your first time. Uh, Susan asked just real quick, how long do we expect this meeting to be? We should be wrapped up by 8 o'clock tonight. All right, looks like we got a good amount of people in here. Love seeing everyone's excitement for the herring count seasons. It's good to see a bunch of new people and people returning. I saw one person say they have a meeting to go to at 7:30. We are recording this meeting for anyone, so if you can't stay for the whole thing, that's okay. We will be sharing it out with everyone at a later date, most likely later this week. But yeah, without further ado, thank you all again for joining us. Very excited to have you all joining us for the 3rd annual Charles River Herring Count. This year it's going to be happening starting on April 14th, running through June 30th. So a little bit longer than last year, but we're very excited to have you. A little bit of information on just kind of our team. We'll introduce ourselves and we'll get right into it. I will kind of introduce myself first because I've already started talking. But my name is Ryan. I'm the Volunteer and Outreach Associate for CRWA. I will be the main point of contact for most volunteers in this program. So if you have questions about scheduling or if there's any kind of equipment issues, you can feel free to email me at any time. And I will get back to you as soon as I'm able. Usually pretty good with the Herring County emails. But yeah, Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. So exciting to see some familiar names as well as some new folks. I'm Lisa, our Senior Restoration Program Manager. I started us up on this herring count 2 years ago with some renewed funding that we got for our river restoration program, and am very excited to see how successful it's been last year, and then I know it's going to be this year. But I'm kind of overseeing the program. You're in great hands with Ryan, and I am excited to see your counts come in and get out there and see all the fish coming up. And I'll pass it over to Jenny.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer. I'm the volunteer engagement intern, and I'll be monitoring the chat today and answering any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, everyone. Sorry if you see me looking off, not at my camera, at my other monitors over there where all the zoom is. So my brain automatically goes to look there. But just a brief kind of rundown of what tonight's going to look like. We already did we're going to start with a little bit of an intro on CRWA. If anyone's a little unfamiliar with us, we'll get you up to speed to some of our programs and work. Then we'll kind of get into some background about why river herring and counting them is so important, and kind of the history behind it a little bit. We'll dive into kind of the statewide monitoring efforts briefly. And then we'll kind of go over the steps for kind of our fish monitoring 101 for anyone who's new or wants a refresher on kind of what the actual process is, how to actually count fish, where you'll be, and all of those things. And then we'll cover at the end how to sign up for your fish counting ships and the programs that we'll be using for that. So without further ado, we can get started and I will pass it off to Lisa.
Awesome. So I am kind of the broad overlook. So in case you're not as familiar with CRWA or the work that we do, here's a little bit of an intro. You can go to the next slide. So we were started in 1965. This is our 60-year anniversary as an organization, which is really exciting. And we actually predate the Clean Water Act. And we have acted as a voice of the river for many years, highly involved in lots of the more recent history of the Charles River and its cleanup efforts and the cleanup of the Boston Harbor more broadly. Next slide. So this is our broad mission to protect, restore, and enhance the Charles River and its watershed through science advocacy and the law. We actually revised this mission statement in about 2019, I believe, and we put in the second part of it. We developed science-based strategies to increase resilience, protect public health, and promote environmental equity as we confront a changing climate. Of course, climate change is really the biggest thing that we need to address and accomplish as an Earth in the coming years and throughout my lifetime, and we take that really seriously. And that restore part of the mission statement is kind of what we focus on in my program here, which includes, restoring the ecology of the river as well as its uses for humans. So you can go to the next slide. So our watershed is quite large, 300 square miles, parts of 35 towns and cities, home to over 1 million people. It's actually about, we should amend this slide, it's about 1.6 million as of the 2020 census data. So quite large, very diverse. The river itself flows 80 miles in a winding path. I love this graphic that really shows how meandering our river is. It's just beautiful on kind of the macro level and the micro level you can see there. And I like to say when I present to students, what else goes from Hopkinton to Boston? But the marathon, of course, is only 26 miles long, not 80. So our river path is much more scenic and beautiful. All right, next slide. So we have 5 different program areas that you can see a snapshot of here. As I mentioned earlier, we're really focused in here on the river restoration program, but we all work together very closely, and our missions are linked really with our river science there being kind of the anchor and the center for a lot of what we do. Next slide. Yeah, so just a highlight of our river restoration program. We work on dam removal projects. We work on invasive species projects, removal of especially water chestnut and bittersweet, as well as other invasive plants in the river. We work on daylighting streams and other kind of riverbank restoration projects to restore more natural ecology in a very populated watershed that can also increase climate resilience and clean the water. Next slide. So, herring, a miracle. Next slide. So why are we thinking about herring? Why do we care about fish in the river? I mean, it's a little bit it's a little bit of a kind of told you, or redundant to say for folks that are here and care about this. But they are abundant in New England rivers. Herring are anadromous fish that spend their life in the ocean and then spawn in rivers during the springtime. They're fry little babies that hatch in the summer, late summer, make their way out to the ocean again in early fall. They are ecologically significant as part of the food web. And a critical piece of our work is focusing on Indigenous food sovereignty and the unfortunate impacts that dams especially have had on the decreasing abundance of river herring and other spawning fish to the Massachusetts Wampanoag and Nipmuc people who are the caretakers of our watershed. Next slide. So what are the migratory fish that we're talking about? Well, in the Charles, we have these 5 that we mainly focus on. So the kind of proper herring are both alewife herring and blueback herring. This is coming out. Apologies, just looking over at my other screen here. We also have American shad, which are kind of known as the founding fish of America. And they are a little bit larger than herring and actually can't quite get up the fish ladder at the Watertown Dam where you all will be doing the counting. We also have rainbow smelt in our river, which is a little bit unique to the Boston Harbor rivers. Some area right downstream of the Watertown Dam that has some really nice riffles and rocky beds are actually the perfect smelt mating area and smelt egg laying area. So you might, if you're lucky, you might see some of those just downstream of the dam. They're a little too small to get up the fish ladder and go further upstream. And then Atlantic salmon were historically in the Charles River. There are actually records in the 1600s of them making it all the way up to Wrentham in a little brook called Eagle Brook. But there are no longer Atlantic salmon in the Charles, unfortunately. But worth mentioning. All right, next slide. So this is just a nice graphic of kind of the spawning cycle of these anadromous fish, in particular the alewife and blueback. So they take a few years to mature in the ocean before they come back up to their spawning rivers to lay their eggs. So in kind of a analogous area in the Mystic River, just north of us, they did some great restoration activities, linking a few of the ponds in the Mystic, and they saw a very big increase in mature herring coming back about 3 to 4 years after that restoration action was completed, because of this kind of maturation cycle of the herring. And Mystic has a great story map on that story of the herring coming back, in case y'all haven't seen it. Maybe we'll find it a little bit later to put in the chat so that you guys can take a look, but it's really great. So, you know, back before colonists arrived more than 400 years ago in the New England area, the herring migration welcomed hundreds of thousands of migratory fish. Now we see about 300,000 or so, 200 to 300,000 in the Charles. But, you know, there's not exact estimates of before that, but one can imagine that there were probably more like 500 to 600,000 at the time before all these dams were put in, maybe more. Next slide. So really the beginning of the end of the abundance of the herring coming up into the Charles River were dams. In the first dam on the river that was built in 1634 was the Watertown Dam. It is actually the natural head of the tide. And so it's a natural area where there's kind of like an abundance and lots of species live there, and a natural area where there's actually a slope. So it made sense to build a dam there because you could get kind of more hydraulic power. And it was an area that before a dam was put in, indigenous communities had a fish weir there as well, because it was a very abundant area. Next slide. And so this is just a kind of a screenshot of some of the major dams on the river in the Charles now. You'll see the two at the end are the New Charles Dam, the very final one before Boston Harbor, which has the locks that are operated right now. And they're actually operated to let in the herring during the migration period. And then the next dam you see on this dot is actually the old Charles River Dam, which is the Museum of Science, where the Museum of Science is now. That is actually no longer a barrier to fish because there is a channel on the side of it, and actually water flows under it as well. So fish can pass through there. So you'll see then if you go upstream, the real first barrier to fish making it upstream is the Watertown Dam. Next slide. And so, yeah, actually in the history of our watershed, herring and alewives were declared extinct. But next slide. They are not extinct. We do see them still. And they are kind of in decline due to these dams that are blocking their migration area and their spawning habitat potential. Next slide. We also work on removing dams not only because of the issues with fish passage, but because they create areas that have poor water quality for aquatic species. So this graphic just kind of shows the different issues with them. You have that fish passage, but you also get this area of scour and erosion beneath the dam. And really the issue is in the impoundment. Those dams are like walls in the river. They block the flow, and so they create this ponding effect where you get areas of stagnant water that get hot, cause evaporation, trap pollution that comes down the river in the sediments, which can then lead to, more invasive species growth and more algal blooms. And then when that, and so hot and stagnant equals lower dissolved oxygen, meaning that there's not as much oxygen for aquatic species to breathe. And when that impoundment is flushed out in storms, you get a whole bunch of hotter water going downstreams, causing thermal pollution. Next. So these are some of the dams that we're focused on removing right now. Watertown is one of them. And right now, the DCR, who owns the dam, the state Department of Conservation and Recreation, is doing an alternatives analysis to determine what the feasibility of removing the dam either fully or partially could be, and going through some of the engineering and sediment transport studies that are needed in order to make that determination. So that study has been in the process for about a year now, and it's supposed to be wrapping up this fall, at which time the DCR has said that they will make a recommendation for one of the alternatives, either no dam removal, partial dam removal, or full breach. And we will be kind of informing the public of what their outcomes have been and really pushing them towards a full removal, which at this point seems completely feasible and reasonable to do. And the main driver for that dam removal really is fish passage at this critical location in the river, as we've seen. The other major project, dam removal project that we're focused on, that's going forward actually into final permitting and design right now, is the South Natick Dam. And we did a lot of community engagement a few years ago, and the town actually had a 2-year-long advisory committee who eventually decided to recommend removal to the select board. And the main reason for that project is because of safety. The dam actually is partly earthen, and there are about 70 trees on the earthen part of it. But if those trees were to fall down in a storm, they would actually uproot part of the dam, which could cause failure. So the kind of consideration was between dam repair and dam removal, and the town is going forward with dam removal of just the spillway part, not the earthen part that has the trees. So those trees will remain intact. The spillway will be breached, and the river will flow free in that section, which will actually open up the largest, if you can see in the graphic here, the largest dam-free section of the main stem of the river, which is really exciting. So right now, the town is applying for funding for the construction phase of that project. And assuming that that funding is obtained, which we fully expect it will be, the timeline for that dam being removed is in late summer, early fall 2026. So actually next year. So that will be pretty high profile, and CRWA will be tracking that project as well. Next slide. Oh, I think that's it.
That's on to me now.
Do we
Great.
want to pause for questions, Ryan, or?
Yeah, there was a couple in the chat that we can read off real quick. Someone asked if the herring are not extinct, are they designated as endangered?
I believe they are. I can verify that, and it's probably by species. That would be a Massachusetts distinction, though, and not necessarily just in the Charles. So I would need to count that. I would need to check that because I'm not sure that they are considered endangered in Massachusetts.
And the next question I see in the chat was, could you say more about how Indigenous peoples are impacted by CRWA's efforts?
Yeah, we actually work closely with a few members of Indigenous communities. One person that we work closely with is from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and another is from the Nipmuc tribe. And we work with them to help promote dam removal, as well as a couple other initiatives. One other is the rights of nature. So this might be something that you guys have heard of actually giving the river or the river herring rights. And so because the history of dams, especially in this area, is so closely linked to the stripping away of Indigenous rights and Indigenous food sovereignty in particular, the restoration of the river and of Indigenous food sovereignty, if more herring are to come back as the river is restored and dams are removed, repairs Indigenous people's relationship with the land and relationship with the settlers as well, as reversing actions, the creation of dams that have stripped away those rights and those ties to the land historically.
And then someone asked, this one I think is more for me, is will be sent the PowerPoint? Yes. I will send that out in the follow-up, this presentation, the follow-up email. It'll also be put up on our herring count webpage for any review at any point as well, if you would like to. And then one last question, I think then we'll move on, but still feel free to put any comments and questions in the chat, and we'll get to them towards the end. But what happens to the fish that can't go up or through the dam?
Yeah, so we do see that a lot of fish can't, and once you get to the fish ladder there, you'll actually see how small of a slot they have to find the location. And the ladder is actually built at the Watertown Dam, is built on the wrong side of the river. It's near the shallowest part, not the deepest part. So when fish come up the river there, they actually have to traverse in front of the spillway and then find their way into the ladder. So there was a study by Division of Marine Fisheries done in 2013 or 2014 that actually tagged fish, American shad in particular, that came up to the foot of the dam, and actually they saw them just go back and forth and back and forth. And they estimated that 80% of the shad there were predated by birds, or went back out to the ocean, and couldn't make it up the dam. So that's what happens to them. And you'll see that's why it's such a good birding spot, because there's a lot of fish that are just pooling there and they can't make it up.
Yeah, there's always blue heron or kind of osprey hanging out nearby while you're counting. Great, so kind of moving on a little bit, we're going to talk some more about the actual counting process and what that's going to look like. This is just a little bit of a breakdown of the overall process of the program. So we are using this data to kind of advocate, like Lisa said, for dam removal and restoration of the Charles River. And so to do that, we're going to be having all of you and CRWA staff at times also going out and helping to monitor how many fish make it up the fish ladder. To do that, we break it down into 10-minute shifts. And we aim for one 10-minute shift every hour from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. With a minimum of like 3 shifts in like a morning, 3 shifts in an afternoon, and 3 shifts kind of towards the evening. And the reason we do the 10-minute shifts is one, it saves people time. We don't have to have you standing for an hour in one spot counting fish because we can extrapolate the data essentially for our abundance number that we're looking for at the end. So that's why the 10 minutes is important. It's very important that it is not any less than 10 minutes or any more than 10 minutes. Otherwise, the way that Division of Marine and Fisheries, who we send this data off to, can't use that data because it falls outside of the kind of bounds of their modeling and their calculations. But like I said, we'll collect this data and then we'll get it all sent over to DMF for them to then calculate, and they give us eventually a total abundance number, which looks like a population estimate, but it technically is not a population estimate, but it gives us a nice idea of kind of how much fish are coming through and spawning each season, and or at least making it past the Watertown Dam when they do so. And then we'll be able to use that data to help kind of track the progress of our restoration efforts later on if/when the Watertown Dam is removed. We will have a baseline of data to work from when we continue moving up the river with our herring count at that point, of kind of tracking the population numbers and hopefully seeing those numbers rise once fish passage has been improved. These next 2 slides are just kind of a little overview of the last 2 years of data. So this is from our 2023 herring count. We had about 54 volunteers in 2023, and we covered 249 shifts, and you can kind of just see our abundance number was pretty low because that's not as many shifts as we had ideally hoped to fill in 2023. So we were missing a lot of data. Theoretically, we were missing a lot of the fish that were coming through because we weren't there to visualize it. And so in total, we only counted about 3,000 fish. But we can still see some small trends in kind of, we're seeing these 2 big waves, which is interesting to note. It's not exactly set in dates, and it's still a little bit early for us to make concrete trend analyses for the herring population, but we are seeing in this data some trends as far as when there might be coming, when we might see the most fish coming through. And then in our 2024 data, which is where we had many more volunteers and we had we had double the shifts essentially covered, we can see that our data was a lot more full. So we had over almost 28,000 fish counted in that window, as opposed to the 3,000 that we did the year prior. And our total abundance number went up to about 230,000 almost. So increased amount of shifts and coverage really makes a huge difference in this program. That's why we are very forward about asking people, sign up for as many shifts as you're able to or willing to, because any kind of shifts that are missed and things can really impact the data quite extremely. And especially in these beginning years, we're still in the first 5 years and less of this program, which is when we're trying to build out a baseline of data. So really important that we get that visualization. I will also say, just as like a note, that we've seen, there are times where people can't even count how many fish are coming through. It has been shown that at the current moment that volunteer counts are the most accurate kind of method. There's a lot of different herring counts across kind of the state and everything like that use a couple other methods. So we see video counting. There are even like some videos that can use an AI to recognize fish and all of that things, and they all are good for capturing the spots when we can't have volunteers at sites and things like that. But I do just want to emphasize like how important volunteer-based counting is, because it is the most accurate numbers that we see to current technology standards. It's kind of the golden standard of the industry. So we do really appreciate all the work that you all put into this, and it shows in the data very, very extremely for us. Skip that. So now we'll kind of go into a little bit of our kind of herring monitoring 101 and how to count. So our fish monitoring methodology is pretty simple. We provide you all of the equipment on site. So there will be a box that has polarized sunglasses, a timer, a notebook to write. You can write each other messages and notes so you can build a little community with your fellow volunteers. We'll have a QR code scanner so you can submit the online data form, which asks basically, what time did you actually count? How many fish did you count? And a couple other, just questions to get some data. And the, excuse me, there is also polarized sunglasses there for you. It's very hard to see fish in the water without them. There is going to be a white platform installed that adds more contrast to the water, so that you're still able to see them. The DMF should be cleaning that on a weekly to twice a week basis this year. I know for some of our volunteers last year, there were some times where there's a lot of sediment and things that builds up on that platform. And so I've spoken to them about hopefully increasing the frequency of cleaning that so that we don't run into that issue as much this season, hopefully. But if it is ever dirty or anything like that, there is a observations kind of section that you can put in the data sheet just to let us know. We check the data on a at least weekly basis, if not more, so we should see that. But you could also email me if it's pretty egregiously dirty and we need to get them out there. They're very accommodating to that. All of our observations are going to be made from the same point. It's on the side of the Watertown Dam where the fish ladder is located. And you will see there's a gate right there that you can open up and stand in, and there's a pretty good viewing spot there to just count as they go through. One thing I do want to note, because it's going to be early in the season, and we've seen that most herring the large majority of herring start coming in May for us. But these early days of zero counts that you will get are vastly important to our data. If we have no data, as in there's no observation, we can't do anything to that. But if we have data of saying there was no fish here, that factors in greatly into DMF's calculations. And as we progress through the years, it'll let us kind of close in on that window of when we know the fish are coming more accurately, so we can kind of narrow down our counting time frame. And without the zero counts, we can't do that as accurately. And so it's very important these early years. I know it's very exciting when all the fish start coming, but when they've stopped coming and they're not coming, it is equally as valuable on our end. So we appreciate anyone, sticking through those zero count days as best as you can. This is kind of going over the supplies that we will have to use. So they will be in this box for you. There is a bike lock on it. We will provide the code for that bike lock in our weekly herring count emails that we send out. So you'll always have access to that as well. There will be a clicker, just a physical clicker. So as you see a fish, you can hit, clicker. It's very, very low tech in that aspect. And we'll also have a timer for you, so you can time yourself for the 10 minutes that you'll be counting. Polarized sunglasses, like I said, so you can see through the water. And then the only thing we really require that you'll bring is a cell phone to record your data. There will be a QR code on site for you all to scan and record that data. If a digital iPhone or smartphone is something you don't have, we can provide links to do it on a desktop computer. Just let us know about that at a time. And if you are going to do that, we do ask that if you could do it, the same day, that would be great. Just to make sure we're not missing any data or anything like that. But yeah, this box will live on site, so you never have to worry about that. Just make sure that when you are done with your fish count, you just lock it back up for the next fish counter, who's coming in the next time slot of that day, essentially. As far as navigation, the address is 42 California Street, Watertown. All of this information, like I said, will also be in the newsletter for you all. As far as location goes, if you're going to be driving there, there is free like street parking for 2 hours on the site, so you don't have to worry about, parking tickets or anything like that. It is also kind of relatively accessible if you're someone who's biking or kind of lives in the areas or walking over. There are some trails and things that you can use to access it. This is kind of what it's going to look like. This is the area. One thing to note, this temporary fence is now a gate. So you don't have to worry about, avoiding the temporary fence in this one. But the box will be located where you can see it in this picture here. And the counting that you'll be doing is just to the right of that box where you'll see the fish ladder, and it's quite distinctive, especially with the large white platform that will be installed. And I will be posting some signage also on the fence that's there. So there are some other visual cues for people as well. This is the code to the box, 4641. This will also, like I said, be included in the email, so you don't have to remember it off the top of your head at any point. There will also be this thermometer on site. This is going to record the air and the water temperature. That is one of the data fields that we do ask for you to record. It's part of DMF's data requirements that they're looking for. It helps with some of their calculations. So there's a probe that goes into the water. If you do see that the probe is washed ashore and no longer in the water, if you could just give it a quick little toss back in the water, that would be great. But it's pretty distinctive. It has one it's like indoor and outdoor, and the outdoor is going to be the water temperature that is read on it, and the indoor is going to be the air temperature. This is what the viewing platform looks like, and this is kind of what you'll see while you're counting. So the fish we're not asking you to ID any fish. I've had people ask that before if we have to figure out, what fish are going through. If you see a fish go up the ladder, count it. Sorry. Yeah, so count them as you see them going up the whiteboard. From right to left, towards the end of the season, you will start to see fish go back down the fish ladder. We don't want to count those ones just because theoretically, we have counted them already. So they won't count towards we don't want them to count towards our abundance number there. Simple kind of the steps you'll follow when you first get there. Reset your clicker to 0 if the volunteer before you hadn't already. Set the timer for 10 minutes. You're going to want to note your start time for us, and you're going to want to note your end time as well. That'll be one of the questions in the data form. And then you can start counting. And once the 10 minutes is up, you can end it. Even if there's like a rush of fish going on or anything like that, you just stop counting at the end of the 10 minutes. And you're done with your shift. So one thing to note when we're we've got some people who like to book, they'll do 2 hours like back to back. One thing to just kind of keep in mind is if you could avoid, say you're booked for like a 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock hour block, and you decide, oh, I'll do my 7:50 to 8 o'clock will be my 10 minutes. If you could avoid doing 8 o'clock to 8:10 as your second shift, if you've booked yourself for 2 hours, DMF recommends that we spread it out a little bit if possible. That won't be something you can coordinate really with, fellow volunteers, but if you're someone who's like, oh, I'll book 2 hours or something, give yourself a good 20, 25 minutes in between those slots would be great. This is kind of a little bit of our data sheet. This will all be provided again to you in the box or anything like that. We will keep a link to it also in the newsletter. It is going to ask you, for your name, date, time you started, time you finished. It's going to also ask for how many fish you counted, and the weather. That's also an important thing that DMF is going to want to track for us, the temperature. And like I said, there will be a space for you to leave any kind of field comments for us. So if you saw anything interesting, have something you wanted to share, like, oh, I saw, a blue heron ate 10 fish in my time I was counting or something. Like that stuff we like to hear about and like share around in the newsletter and stuff. Also, our colleague, our communications associate Carly, her email is in that if you want to take any photos, we'd love to see photos of volunteers in the field, um, cool things you might see herring yourself. It's really, we want to build as much community in that as we can. Uh, and so feel free to share any photos or anything like that. I think we try to put a photo or two in each of our weekly newsletters if we got them that month or that week. Got a little ahead of myself when I was talking, so this is kind of those those data quality points that we'll be asking throughout the data sheet. This is another look at the thermometer. Like I said, the indoor temperature is going to be your air temp, while the outdoor is going to be the water temp. Think blue is water as far as looking on it. And once you've finished up counting, you can just return your materials to the box, lock the fence, or not lock the box, close the fence, and make sure you just don't leave anything behind. And you're done with your shift, and you can go on about your day. I can take a break now just for a couple of questions, and then I'll go over how you can book your actual time slots. It looks like Lisa's been answering a couple of questions, so.
I think that I'll note that came up a couple times last year, especially during the kind of few days that have a lot of fish coming through. Folks are counting over 100 in their 10-minute slot. Up to 1,000, I think, was our highest last year, which was really crazy. And so at that point, they're coming really, really fast. So one recommendation that a few folks had was they downloaded like a clicker app on their phone, and you can tap like 10 at a time for that one. Our clickers are just one at a time, so we can't really do that. But if you're finding that your thumb is going faster than or the fish are going faster than your thumb can go, that's kind of a recommendation for that.
Yeah, they get to some pretty high numbers. It's quite very cool to see. All right, I think we got all of our questions in the chat answered. So, how do you sign up? That's going to be our next thing. So we're going to be using for our returning volunteers the same calendar system that we used last year. We were generally happy with how things went, at least on our end, and we had it all planned out as well. So we will put up on our website a schedule now button on our herring count page, which you can find, which we will have linked. I will also in our weekly emails directly link to the calendar system. So that'll probably be the most convenient way for you all to see if you want to schedule some more shifts. Once you get in, it'll bring you to this kind of front page here. And you'll see like all services. You'll click on that. And it'll bring you to this calendar page here. And it'll show you all available shifts for the date that you have selected. And you can pick from there whichever of those you are available to and want to count fish at, essentially. So if it's already been taken, it won't be there, so you don't have to worry about kind of double booking with another volunteer or anything like that. And you just have to put in a little bit of information. It'll ask for your name, your email, and then you can book the appointment. And you'll be all set. We have it set up now too. You should be receiving reminder emails for your counting shifts. So if you shouldn't have to worry too much about like remembering like exactly, oh, did I sign up for 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock? You should be receiving reminder emails. If you find that you're not, do feel free to reach out to me and I'll make sure that everything's there's no issues on our side and that we can troubleshoot from there. You do have to book if you're someone who wants to do recurring appointments, you do unfortunately still have to book individually. That was not something that we were able to get updated this season. That is something we'll be looking to for next season. So if you're looking to, reserve multiple time slots and things like that, you do have to book recurringly. But it is, it's not the longest process if you book, or booking, a couple weeks in advance or anything like that.
Hey,
And
Ryan,
it'll last, yeah.
I'm just seeing, I think folks are wanting to start booking right now. It looks like the link for this year's booking on the pick time isn't up on our website yet. Do you want to share that in the chat?
Yes, I can. I was holding off until after the training to open up the
Okay.
booking for this, just so everyone had seen how to do it before we have to correct anything if there's any issues. But I can share it with everyone after the training. I see. Oh, Sally, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, is it one of the things I know had come up last year was when you get to let's say it's 8 o'clock, but
Mhm.
nobody has, or it's 8:01 and nobody has signed up for that shift from 8 o'clock. The way the system was, you couldn't sign up if you saw that it was, you couldn't tell that a whole hour block was
I
blank
see.
once you got to that 8 o'clock time. Is that still the case this year? So that, because sometimes like I'd rush over because I'd
Mhm.
see, oh, okay, if I got there at 7:55, if I checked at 7:55, I could see no one was signed up for 8 o'clock. But if I checked at 8:01, it was gone. You couldn't
I got you.
check.
And that might still be the case. I'm gonna have to play around in the settings to see if that's something that I can fix.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head if that is something that we did, like I said, we upgraded to like a more premium version of this calendar this year, so I have a lot more control. So I'll look into that and see if that's something we can correct.
Okay.
I would say email me, but I can't guarantee I would get back to you in time every time that something like that occurs.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Great. And then I also have a video recording for everyone of how to book a shift. If the, picture slides are insufficient for anyone, in the slides here when we share that out, you can watch this video to just go. It just goes in the same steps from the screenshots essentially of how to book a shift. Don't need to watch it now. The one thing we do ask that every volunteer does though before going to their first shift is to fill out our waiver. Even if you filled it out in like the last year, it's good to just have it filled out one more time for us. It's just it's for ours and DCR's liability, who owns the property that we're going to be working on. So it's just very important, especially if anyone is under the age of 18. They do need a parent or guardian to fill out the waiver, an individual waiver for that for the minor as well. Even if they're just going to hang out with you, please just fill out the waiver for us, especially because they're near water, all those things. So yeah. If you have any questions or your shift needs to get like shifted around or anything like that, you can email me. You should be able to, in the confirmation email you'll receive when you book an appointment. If you need to cancel your shift, you can cancel your shift on your own. That is an option on your end. So you don't have to email me like, oh, I can't make this anymore. You can just feel free to cancel the shift, and it'll be made re-available for anyone if that time hasn't elapsed yet, essentially. And then if at any point during the monitoring season you have questions or concerns or anything like that, do feel free to reach out to me and I will get back to you with what we can do about it or how we can assist in any way. And that is all I have for our slides. Do we have?
There was a question in the chat. Well, one is Millie asks, what about no-shows? Do you want to address that, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes a little bit back to Sally's thing of we don't have, I don't believe we have a way to kind of show it if the shift has already happened, it doesn't show up anymore. For volunteers who do no shows, it happens. Not, people forget they signed up for things. We do check our entries based off of our calendar submission, or check our calendar bookings with our actual data entries. So there are going to be times where we're like, oh, this person put in like a 15-minute time slot, or they had a booking, but we don't see their data. So you'll get emails from us about that. And it's no one's in trouble for anything if you missed your shift. It's just we want to make sure that we've collected all the data. Every now and then people forget to submit the data, even though they did count. So no shows happen. We'll reach out to you if we see that we are missing data and the booking was still there. Not a huge deal on our end. We'll figure it all out. There is an option to add your bookings to your Google Calendar though, or calendar system if you use a different one, to help alleviate any of that. And like I said, this year you can receive either email or text reminders for your appointments. So hopefully that will be kind of a reduced thing, or we can at least people will be able to know like, oh, I can cancel ahead of time. I forgot I have a lunch with my friend today and I can't go count herring. But you could invite your friend to go count herring with you before lunch.
Valerie is asking, she can't find the button to press to get the shifts on our website. I think Valerie, Ryan said that he was going to share it right after the training, so that everybody could kind of get first dibs at signing up for your slots. Is that right, Ryan?
Yes, I can send that up. It should be restricted. One thing, it should be restricted, so you can't book anything outside of the herring count window. But just in case it's not, just a reminder, April 14th to June 30th is the window. So no equipment will really be available for you to count before or after that date. So do your best not to sign up for those shifts if there's anything before or after that window.
Okay, great. Another question was from Theodore. Is there a time of day when the migrations tend to occur? Meaning, like, is there a particular time of day when we would want to make sure a shift is covered?
I think it's too early for us to tell right now. I don't think we've done any kind of time-based analysis for our particular river. I have seen people talk about there is actually some fluctuations at, like late night herring runs. That is not something we are able to capture. It's not something DMF recommends. It's not safe to send volunteers out at night, so we don't do it. That is one of those instances though, where that kind of video monitoring and those AI camera detection systems can come in handy for catching that kind of window. But yeah, I don't think we've done a time-based analysis for when we see the most during our 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. window.
And I'll just reiterate that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and making sure we have our goal is to have kind of all 12 of those hours covered with a 10-minute slot in each hour. But really the most important is that we get at least 2 people in kind of the first 4 hours, the middle 4 hours, and the last 4 hours. That's what DMF looks for in order to kind of say we've gotten a consistent data set so that we can run, our count numbers through their modeling so that we can have a good comparison from year to year with how many fish are coming into the river. So all of those are important, not only to capture when fish are there, but also when fish aren't. Those 0 counts, as Brian mentioned,
are equally as valuable as a 2,000 count of fish, even if it's a little more boring.
I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the waiver form. There's a question, volunteer/participation date. If recurring, please indicate the date you were trained or first volunteer date, meaning like 2 years ago, last year, today.
You could put today's date as
Okay.
For that, or whatever day you're filling out the waiver. It's
okay, not the first time you volunteered.
No, it would just be whatever day you're filling out the waiver.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions? Is the yellow thing the ladder?
I tried to answer that.
Okay.
Do other folks want to, we can take a few more questions if folks want to come off of mute also, or put in the chat.
Like I said, all this information will be in our follow-up email this week. So no need to study too hard right now. You'll have plenty of resources and things at your disposal very soon and quite often on our weekly emails once things get started. But if that is everything as far as questions go, and if you think of anything kind of after the fact, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to clarify any questions or thoughts. Oh, one thing I did want to mention is if anyone's like super interested in like the science that DMF does behind all of this, from last year's training, we did have a speaker from DMF and they went into more detail, and we have that footage and recording as well that people are more than welcome. We're more than welcome to share with people. And it was a very technical presentation, and I think not for everyone's taste, but it is for our more kind of technical minded folks, maybe could be of interest. But if that is it, we are just on time, actually, which is great. So thank you all again for joining us. Really excited for this. It's one of our favorite programs here. Happy and appreciative of all the work that you all put into this program. Every shift makes a huge difference. So thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ryan. Thank
everyone.
you, Lisa.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Tell your friends and coworkers
Yes.
to come.
Spread the herring word.